Hello, and welcome to another Behind the Music, our Transfigured Nights conversation series with the artists performing. Our next concert is November 17th at 7:30 in the Performance Hall. It's our second of the Art Music Monday series. And joining me today, because of very special work that will be on the program, is our one and only Joel Martinson, who is our artistic director for the entire Transfigured Night series, and of course, organist, director, choirmaster extraordinaire for the Church of the Transfiguration here in Dallas. So we're here to talk a little bit because he's been commissioned to be able to premiere a new work of his for organ, the organ that you see in the performance hall, violin, and cello. Joel, welcome to our program.
Thank you, Jonathan.
So tell us a little bit about how the idea for this piece came about. So this was, I think, an auction piece for when you went to Scotland. Is that correct?
Correct. We had an event in September of 2 years ago, I believe, because we went to Scotland in 24. And so over the years between St. Rita and also Transfiguration, when we have had fundraisers for events, sometimes for choir tours, sometimes for the organ, sometimes for other things, I've donated commissions, and the last two at Transfiguration, we've done them as subscriptions rather than actual like silent auction items. So I did an anthem once for Pentecost, and then this one was a subscription, especially since it was a bigger piece. We knew we could raise way more money if people, I believe the minimum amount or the sort of buy-in was $300 increments, or $300. So if I remember right. And I think we raised about $6,000, which would have been pretty much the cost of two, I think, land packages for like section leaders or to help, the money all went together. So I had the idea for a while of writing, when you have friends, they're like, hey, write a piece. So Maria Schleuning, violinist, and Gayane Manasjan Fullford, cello, have been really integral, obviously, Gayane, of course, in art music. And since COVID, Maria has been pretty much our chief violinist. And so I thought, okay, we'll take a treble instrument, a bass instrument that can also play in the treble very well, if you know Guyane. And then our organ in the performance hall, the cairn, donated by David Stinson and J.D. Godwin, so to have a piece that would really utilize that. We've only performed one piece on art music, which was a Handel organ concerto, and then one on a part on the others. So I thought, well, that'd be a nice thing to do right for that, and have something that would be premiered on art music, and in a way, thank the donors who helped us go to Scotland and also underwrote the piece. And on an actual concert. It's nice to have it, here's what it's for, here's what it is, and all of that. And so anyway, that's where the idea came, and it was to be premiered in May, and I was working on the last movement and had an unfortunate eye infection. And so we had to premiere it to this season, and we waited till November to give me a little more time to get the last movement done.
Well, we're so glad to finally get to hear it and glad that your health has improved with that as well. So, you, of course, had the instrumentation in mind. The structure, as I understand it, is sort of a three movement. Was that already pre-arranged? How did you decide what kind of piece you would write?
I've The nice thing about three movement piece, especially like in a liturgical setting, is that you've got a prelude, a postlude, and then for Episcopal or Catholic churches, you've got something done during communion, since we normally do anthems at the offertory. So the idea was to have something that that could work in the service, but was not necessarily, quote unquote, church music as we think of it. It wasn't to be really Gebrauchsmusik, something that was in German that means useful music, but something that would be art music to take follow the theme of the series. So music that pushed the envelope a little bit for what you would expect hearing in church. So it's artistic and modern, but also that just by its the scope could be used in a service. So that's what I was thinking of. And three movements gives you that a sort of, it can be fast or it can be an introduction, and then a maybe more meditative. In the case of this, I chose Sarabande, so which is not a form particularly, it's just a rhythmic structure, but it basically is a variation form. I mean, I used a variation form for it. And then the last movement, Gayane said, when I got close to having it done last spring, Gayane said, write a romp, just write something that's, fun. So at one point, the movement's title actually said romp. But, and I thought that was, a great title. I mean, but it's like, I don't know, because romp these days doesn't mean the same thing. So I had postlude on it, and it was like, I don't really like that. And it's a rondo, meaning this joyous theme comes back. And then I chose for the last rondo is a theme of something different, another theme, the same theme again, something different, and so on and so forth. And so on the third something different, I thought I should write a fugue. I knew what that would mean, which would be a lot of time and some headache and all that. But, that's good for a composer to have to do something. So anyway, I'm pleased with how it turned out. And so because of that, the the fugue ended up being a good 2 minutes, I think, of the 6. And really, so I wrote Rondo Fugue, I titled it, and I think that says what it is. And the prelude is generally, is really a prelude, and has maybe an homage to the idea of church because it has kind of a hymnic theme in the middle of it. And yeah, you picked that up too. And that also gets big. So you have this idea of, in that it's sort of 3-part structure, and there's a little bit of an arch form to it. And in the Sarabande too, it also has, along with variations, there also is sort of an arch form. It grows, it gets big, and then comes down from there. I think that gives you an idea of sort of the 3 parts structure and why it's different than a church piece. It's not,
Sure.
It's meant to push the envelope, and similar to some of my other pieces that do that. The organ is a church instrument. I mean, it can be concert hall, but in the South these days, especially, we just think of it as, it's church / concert hall, but its life has been in the church. So
Now, what has been the opportunities, the inherent challenges? Can you tell us a little bit about the instrument, the organ that's in the performance hall, and what it felt like to try to incorporate that specific instrument as opposed to what we have in the gallery for being able to write this piece?
the organ in the performance hall is a 4-stop instrument for 2 men. That's 2 manuals and pedal, and it's really. I know you went to SMU, so it has a twin over there, a sister, almost the same, I think. So it's 4 stops. So it is basically a practice organ. I've used the term chamber organ in the title, and I'm still tweaking what I want to call it, but it's basically a chamber organ. It's not a positive, and it's not a portative. It's got a full pedal, and actually has a bigger compass than our instrument. It goes up to C in the manuals, and it goes to G in the pedals, which is kind of interesting. What's unique about this as a practice organ is that the 8-foot flute is on both manuals, and that the pedal has a totally different, independent, open 8-foot instead of a 16. And that's really unique, but allows a certain thing to happen, which is I can play a pedal line and take the 4-foot principle, play it down an octave so that it sounds like an 8, and then have that 8-foot independent in the pedal. Frequently on a practice organ, the 8-foot is usually have 2 manual 8s, but one of them is in the pedal, and so you don't have that independence. So what's challenging is that if you pull that 8 in the manuals, you have it on one manual, it's on the other. So if you play down an octave, you get a 16-foot, which you don't really want. And then there's a 4-foot principle on one manual and a 2-foot principle on the other. So you've got 2 8s and then a 4 and a 2, and if you put them together, it's a fairly big sound and would drown out a violin and a cello. But used the manuals, I only used that 2-foot once, which is the last movement going back and forth with the 8 and 4 there. And so it gives a brightness, but it's not oppressive with the manuals. So anyway, but it is a challenge. It made me think a lot. And I find now when I'm practicing a year after starting the first movement and playing down an octave where your hands are just way, way down, that, it's kind of a challenge to the organist. And I wrote in some parenthetical notes so that if you had an organ that where you didn't have to do that, you would play more notes, but it works. But we kind of have loud, it's very soft with the 8 and very beautiful. Or you add that principle even down an octave, and it's a much, much bigger sound. So it's meant to be a good practice organ, not necessarily to accompany anything. But it's led me to probably title this Chamber Suite for violin, cello, and organ, and rather than suite for violin, cello, and chamber organ, because that puts a limitation. And if you're on a big organ, you just can't use very much of it, or you'd be drowning out the instruments. So I think chamber suite sort of gives what it is for a room with a small organ, and you add a couple other instruments. So
I love that title. I think that's a great title for it, and I love the kind of the limitations that allowed you to then figure out really creatively how to make that instrument in particular sing. And I know that'll be really exciting for all of us to hear. So did you say you've done a Handel organ sing on that organ? Have you done has that been heard on the art music series much?
Just one Handel concerto and organ concerto. And so Handel wrote those for intermissions and preludes to his oratorios. So, and we've only used one on a part. They just really have normally 2 violins. There might be a viola, but I don't think in each of them, and then cello. Or bass, there could be a bass too, but we've just all kind of crammed ourselves in that corner to do that so far. The organ has been featured alone when we were in the recording stage during COVID, and we had every instrument in the church. So we recorded it, and I played a couple pieces with Gayane. So on it, but those were only on that recording. And let's see what else. We've used it on a couple of benefit concerts where I'm trying to think what the benefits were for. Um, I think for our organ and music endowment, and also for a trip where we've had a like musical soiree in there. So the organ has been featured, but more extra art music, extra Transfigured Nights than actually on the series itself.
Well, it's such a staple in that room, so it'll be really exciting to get to hear it and hear it with Gayane and Maria as well. I just think that that's going to be really wonderful. I'm thinking about your training as an organist and kind of wondering a little bit about your origins as just a composer, but then how your compositional writing interacts with your training as an organist, your immense skill as an organist, and what that allows you to write and create when you're doing something like this, especially being able to write with strings as well.
Mhm. Um, yeah, let me do like a two-part thing. When I was in high school, might even go back to junior high, but I had a very good friend who was a violinist and then started playing viola. And so that would be my earliest experience with strings. I actually played cornet, trumpet, and French horn. And so my earliest experience with a friend who played strings was Janine. And I did write for her and then for a soprano, a friend of ours. So I wrote a piece when I was a kid that was three movements due. And I called it the Isaiah Sonata because he is part of Isaiah 43, I think it was 42, 43, one of those. And so I wrote for strings at that point, and I accompanied her a lot. So I got to know what strings could do. She played, I think it was Sweet Hebraic, which is Ernest Bloch, and I loved that. I loved modal music, and so that was an influence. And by accompanying my other friend, the singer, on Sam Barber's Hermit songs, some of them, I got to know that style, and really, so that opened my ears as an organist to two American composers who were a modern, and of course more modern 50 years ago when I was 15 than now. Um, and so that took me more out of sort of brand X church music, or just organ music. So that was important to me. And then having a partner for 34 years now who is a cellist was important because I can ask him, and in this piece too, like about double stops. And I'd previously written a piece for cello and organ called Sevens for Two, which is dedicated to Guyane, and we've played it on art music. We've also on Transfigured Nights. And so writing for Guyane showed me what I could do, and particularly with the cello in basically a treble register. And so that is a real aid when you're dealing with an organ that's got bass. We think of cello as a bass instrument, but the thing is, cellists can play up high. And so you hear her in this with Maria. And Maria, I've got in the first movement, she's on the lowest note, and they can be like right together and over each other. I do use Guyane low, and then David was like, you need to write, for Maria go high, and it's like, I know I haven't, gotten there yet. So then I've got her high, and I've got Guyane high, and so what's really great with cello and violin is you can say you've got cello register, viola register, and even second, she doesn't sound like a second violin, but up there you've got that. And so I learned by writing my Sevens for Two, which I think it's 8 or 9 minutes, and for organ. I really um, learned and was, let's say, convinced on where a cello could play and could soar out. And of course, I knew that before, but using it with the organ, and if we use flutes and flutes 8 and 4, it all works well. So that has been, and David's help as a cellist. And when I was writing the piece, I tried some things out. I mean, I'm absolutely no good at writing, but you kind of want to, try that. I mean, I did play guitar at once, and that's terrible to say with a really, professional, but you know what you have to do to stretch your fingers and all that. So that was a help with it. Let's see, you also asked organ. So I guess that kind of answers both questions. I did study composition, and then, like, say, for the fugue, I had I was going to say two bouts of 18th century counterpoint. Um, which
Two
those are,
trial periods, two
yeah,
sentences.
exactly, two sentences.
Prison sentences.
Yeah, so for those of you, 18th century counterpoint would be you're writing in a style like Bach would have written with all these rules. And you're trying to you're trying to make it sound as if you were I mean, at its best, acceptable bad Bach, I mean, basically, or good handle, or, acceptable handle, Telemann. But, no one can replicate Bach. And in my own writing, I enjoyed writing 20th century counterpoint, Hindemithyan stuff. And with my first composition teacher and in my first semester of counterpoint, I actually had a book that I wrote 20th century counterpoint, like a duet for bassoon and, I don't know, oboe or something. So I've always liked to write that. And organists, I don't know how you can be an organist and not like a fugue. We have to play
It's
it, and it's
required.
it's
It's a
required.
required tool of the trade.
It is. And so to see if you can write, I mean, and how to write fugues that don't necessarily sound, I mean, it's a conservative, its very nature, it's a conservative technique or procedure. But how to not sound like, Bach with wrong notes. And so that's fun. But like I said, it always takes a lot of work because you don't have sort of an exact tonal system that you're using, and how to get back, how to go through keys. There's no, you're not punished in string playing. With strings, they can play in any key, and this organ's tuned in equal temperament, so it can go to any key. Um, um, and you're not, they can play in all sorts of keys that organists may not want to, because we're not asked to. So anyway, so it was a challenge, but it was also fun. And my last two parts of, so those, if you're watching this after you actually hear the piece, the last two bits I had was the very end of the fugue, getting back to, and I want to say trying to get back, to the first rondo motive. And I decided, if it were a fugue that would be totally encapsulated, it should have, the last theme should be back in G, and I ended up with stretto in D, which would lead to G, because you have to have some sort of tonal stuff. But I decided, no, we don't have to hear this is not a fugue. I mean, it is a fugue in a different piece. But it's more than like just fugato passage. So I was saving the G for the bum ba da dum there, and then the very last bit was to make the rondo theme the longest that it had been, but lead to a coda that would definitely ground us back in the main key. So those were the two bits that I spent probably 10, 15 hours on this week. And sometimes we have issues. And last week, my issue was I was trying to do that stretto on D, and I had it going like in five voices. And last week, which happened to be the days around my birthday, I ended up unraveling the fugue. It's like you've created, like my David is also not only a cellist, but he's a weaver. And you trying something out, and then you just decide, okay, I have to take out all this back to this point. So that's what I did, and that's not fun, because you want to be, you know, in 12 hours I can finish this piece, and it probably took me 20. But it's just, it's what happens. So I still, even today, have to take out a few notes that I'm sure you heard that were in the last thing, and it's just like hearing it with Gayane and Maria. I just need some chords to be not as high on the organ near the end of the rondo. And so when I go to practice this afternoon, I will just do some omission and writing down. And if it's not the exact final form, it's close enough that we'll tweak it. But anyway, it should have an acceptable premiere on Sunday. And I guess my old age is teaching me that something I will, it's going to be done, but there's a little living with things at the end, and maybe I need a little more living and then tweak a bit, and we'll see.
Well, it's stunning what you've already written, as I've gotten to hear some of the audio files of it and gotten to look at the scores, and want to highly recommend you all join us on Monday, November 17th, 7:30 in the performance hall. I've described the first movement as a warm hug, feels like it has this water-like movement around it, and the planing fourths, that fourth movement feels very like pastoral symphony with it. His second movement, this saraband, I've always loved his writing in a saraband style. He has the fourth movement from his Firm Foundation Suites is one of my all-time favorite pieces to get to play, which is also a saraband, incidentally. And Romp is still a really good title for the third movement, even if it's only the inside joke version, because it has a jaunty characteristic and some really inspired your da dum ba da da dum writing is just really fun through it. So want to encourage everybody to be able to be there. Joel, thank you so much for your time today, for the insight into the magnificence, which is your brain, and how you managed to pull all of this together. It's really an exceptional work, and heartfelt congratulations. Can't wait to hear the premiere.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. It's been fun to talk.
Great. Thank you, everyone. We'll talk to you soon and see you on Monday. Bye.